An immigrant janitor returned a lost wallet, unknowingly passing the CEO's secret integrity test. A moment that would ripple through both their lives like stones cast into still water. Miguel Alvarez hadn't meant to become the focal point of a corporate experiment. He'd only meant to do what was right. The harsh fluorescent lights of Sterling Enterprises' 42nd floor buzzed overhead as Miguel guided his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. It was 11:47 p.m. The executives had long since departed for their suburban homes, leaving behind coffee rings on expensive desks and carelessly discarded memos that spilled from overflowing trash bins, evidence of lives so different from his own. Miguel's hands were cracked and raw from industrial-strength cleaners. 6 nights a week for the past 8 months, he'd moved through these gleaming corridors like a ghost, present but unseen. The building housed over 2,000 employees, yet fewer than 10 had ever bothered to learn his name. His shoulders ached as he emptied another wastepaper basket. 3 more hours until his shift ended, then a 90-minute commute to the small apartment he shared with his cousin's family in Queens. 4 hours of sleep, if he was lucky, before his second job stocking shelves at a corner market. This was the price of his American dream. A dream that had begun to fade like an old photograph, its edges curling with disappointment. 26 months ago, Miguel had left Bogota with hope burning in his chest and promises echoing in his ears. His engineering degree, earned through years of night classes while supporting his mother and sisters, meant nothing here. Lack of American experience. They told him at interviews, their eyes sliding away from his too eager face, his too formal suit bought secondhand. "Mr. Alvarez from Colombia?" they would say, the question itself revealing their doubts. "Yes, sir. 5 years at Construcciones Modernas," he would answer, the words practiced until perfect. "We'll keep your resume on file." The resume that now collected dust in the drawer beside his narrow bed. Miguel paused his cart outside the corner office, the CEO's domain. The nameplate read Jonathan Sterling, in simple, elegant lettering. He'd never seen the man, only his mess. Sterling always worked late, leaving behind coffee cups with lipstick stains from his parade of visitors, scattered papers bearing confidential stamps, and occasionally personal items forgotten in haste. Cufflinks, a scarf once, a fountain pen that probably cost more than Miguel earned in a month. Tonight, the office was in particular disarray. The cleaning protocol stated that desks were to be wiped down, but items never moved or disturbed. Miguel worked carefully around the stacks of folders, the laptop closed but still warm, and his cloth paused over something out of place. Tucked partly under the leather desk pad was a sleek leather wallet. Miguel's heart stumbled in his chest. He glanced at the doorway, suddenly feeling like an intruder rather than an employee. The wallet shouldn't be here. Mr. Sterling had surely left hours ago and would need this. Miguel lifted it gingerly. The leather was butter soft beneath his calloused fingers, the kind of quality that announced itself without trying. He hesitated, torn between protocols and common sense. He should report it to security. But Evans, the night guard, had made his disdain for the cleaning staff abundantly clear. "Just do your job and don't touch anything that matters," he'd said during orientation, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Miguel slipped the wallet into his pocket. He would return it directly to Mr. Sterling tomorrow, perhaps even receive a thank you. He allowed himself a small smile at the thought of finally being seen. What Miguel couldn't know was that 12 floors above, in a darkened security room, Jonathan Sterling watched the grainy footage with intense interest. The wallet contained $800 in cash, 2 platinum credit cards, and a driver's license with an address in Greenwich, Connecticut. It had been placed there deliberately 3 nights ago, and Miguel was the 4th person to discover it. He was the first not to take it. "Interesting," Jonathan murmured, leaning forward as the janitor carefully continued cleaning the office without disturbing anything else. At 52, Sterling had built his technology empire from nothing, guided by an almost pathological attention to detail and a deep-seated belief that character revealed itself when no one was watching, or when someone thought no one was watching. The experiment had begun 6 months ago, after a significant data breach had cost the company millions. Trust had been shattered. Between executives, between departments, between Sterling himself and the organization he'd built. The investigators had suggested it was an inside job, but couldn't determine who. So Jonathan had devised his own method of assessment, layer by layer, through the company. "Sir," his assistant Vivian said from the doorway, "your car is waiting." "Cancel it," he replied without looking away from the screen. "I'll be staying a while longer." Vivian nodded, used to his peculiarities. "Shall I order dinner?" "No. Then remembering himself, "Thank you, Vivian. Good night." When she had gone, Jonathan rewound the security footage, watching again as the janitor, what was his name? He'd have to check the personnel files, discovered the wallet, the slight widening of eyes, the cautious glance around, the moment of indecision. And then, instead of pocketing the cash as the previous 3 employees had done, this man had taken the entire wallet, clearly intending to return it intact. Jonathan's lips curved into a small smile. Perhaps he had found what he was looking for. Miguel couldn't sleep. The wallet sat on his small nightstand, a luxury item out of place among his modest possessions. The digital clock read 4:17 a.m., and he'd be up again in 40 minutes for his morning job. His cousin Ernesto snored softly from the living room couch, while Ernesto's wife and children slept in the apartment's only bedroom. The wallet seemed to watch him, a moral question mark in leather form. Miguel had looked inside, of course he had, to confirm the owner's identity, and the amount of cash had made his breath catch. $800, 2 weeks' worth of his combined income, just sitting there uncounted, perhaps even unnoticed by a man wealthy enough to forget such a sum. For one shameful moment, he'd thought about how that money could help his mother back home, how her arthritis medication had doubled in price last month, how his youngest sister, Lucia, needed textbooks for university that cost more than many families in their neighborhood earned in a month. But the thought had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. His mother had raised him to believe that a man's integrity was his only true possession. "Everything else can be taken from you," she would say, her work-worn hands gentle on his cheek. "But only you can surrender your honor." The alarm's harsh beep cut through his thoughts. Miguel rose, body protesting, and tucked the wallet safely into his jacket pocket. Today he would find Mr. Sterling and return what was his. Perhaps this small act of honesty might be noticed, perhaps not, but he would know he had done right. The morning shift at Mendoza's market passed in a blur of heavy boxes and inventory counts. By 2:30 p.m., Miguel had just enough time to shower and change before heading to Sterling Enterprises for his evening janitorial shift. He chose his cleanest shirt, a pale blue button-up his sister had sent him for Christmas, and carefully combed his hair. The wallet remained securely in his inside jacket pocket, a weight against his chest. As his train rattled toward Manhattan, Miguel rehearsed what he might say. "Mr. Sterling, I found this in your office." Simple. Director. Professional? He wouldn't mention how much he needed a break, how his engineering resume had been repeatedly rejected, how his American dream was slowly suffocating under the weight of reality. That would be inappropriate. Desperate. Sterling Enterprises occupied 20 floors of a gleaming midtown tower. Miguel entered through the service entrance as usual, nodding to the other maintenance workers preparing for their shifts. He changed into his uniform but kept his jacket on, the wallet his secret mission. "You look different today, Alvarez," said Hector, another janitor who'd been with the company for nearly a decade. "Got a date after work?" His tone was teasing but kind. Miguel smiled. "No, nothing like that. Just some personal business to take care of." "Well, don't let Rodriguez see you out of uniform. He's been on a power trip since they made him supervisor." Miguel nodded his thanks for the warning and headed to the service elevator. His usual floors were 38 through 44, but the executive floor, where Sterling's main office was located, was 50. He would need to find a reason to go there. The elevator doors opened, and Miguel's heart sank. Evans, the security guard with a perpetual scowl, stood waiting. "ID," Evans demanded, though he saw Miguel 5 nights a week. Miguel produced his company badge, trying to appear casual. "You're not scheduled for 50, Evans said, checking his tablet. "No, sir. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Sterling's assistant. I found something that belongs to Mr. Sterling." Miguel kept his voice steady, though his pulse was not. Evans raised an eyebrow. "You found something?" "Yes, sir. His wallet. In his office last night. Give it to me. I'll make sure he gets it." Evans extended his hand, palm up, expression unchanged. Miguel hesitated. Something in the guard's flat eyes made him uneasy. "I was hoping to return it personally, to make sure it reached him." "Are you suggesting I'd steal it?" Evans took a step closer, using his height advantage. "Or that I can't do my job properly?" "No, sir, of course not." Miguel retreated a half step. "It's just that..." "Just what? You thought you'd get a reward? Maybe meet the big boss, tell him your sad story." Evans' voice dropped to a mocking whisper. "They don't care about people like us, Alvarez. We're replaceable parts in their machine." The words stung because they echoed Miguel's darkest thoughts, but the wallet felt heavy against his chest, a responsibility he couldn't surrender to this man's cynicism. I'll just leave a note for his assistant then, Miguel said, trying to move past. Evans blocked his path. Badge, he said, holding out his hand again. You're going to be reassigned. We can't have cleaning staff trying to access executive areas without authorization. Miguel's stomach dropped. He couldn't lose this job. Not now when rent was due and his mother's medication costs had increased again. He was about to surrender when a crisp voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here, Evans? Both men turned to see a tall woman in an impeccable gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Miguel recognized her as Vivian Chen, Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. He'd cleaned her office countless times but had never spoken to her. No problem, Missu. Chen, just a staff member out of bounds. Evans replied, his tone instantly more deferential. Vivian's gaze shifted to Miguel, her expression neutral but assessing. And you are? Miguel Alvarez, ma'am. Night cleaning staff. He straightened his shoulders slightly. I found Mr. Sterling's wallet in his office last night. I wanted to return it directly. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. You have Mr. Sterling's wallet? Miguel nodded, reaching carefully into his jacket to produce it. Everything is still inside. I checked only for identification. Vivian took the wallet, opening it briefly before looking back at Miguel with new intensity. How long have you worked here, Mr. Alvarez? 8 months, ma'am. She nodded once decisively. Come with me, please. Evans began to protest, but Vivian silenced him with a raised hand. Mr. Sterling will want to thank Mr. Alvarez personally. And Evans? We'll discuss your approach to staff interactions later. The security guard's face flushed, but he stepped aside. As Miguel followed Vivian to the executive elevator, he could feel Evans' eyes burning into his back. That was brave, Vivian said quietly as the doors closed. Evans has sent 3 people packing this month alone. Miguel didn't know how to respond. The elevator climbed swiftly, his ears popping slightly with the rapid ascent. Mr. Sterling values integrity above all else. She continued studying him. It's become something of an obsession for him lately. The elevator opened directly into a reception area, more spacious than Miguel's entire apartment. Vivian gestured for him to follow, leading him past curious glances from administrative staff. They stopped before a set of double doors in polished walnut. Wait here, she instructed, disappearing inside. Miguel stood awkwardly, aware of his uniform, his worn shoes, the curious stares. He resisted the urge to check his reflection in the gleaming surfaces surrounding him. Whatever happened next, he had done the right thing. That would have to be enough. The doors opened and Vivian reappeared. Mr. Sterling will see you now. Miguel took a deep breath and stepped into the lion's den. Jonathan Sterling's office was nothing like Miguel had imagined, from cleaning its satellite version on the 42nd floor. This space was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. Minimalist furniture in leather and steel created an atmosphere of restrained power. The man himself stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the city as if surveying his kingdom. Mr. Rusher, Alvarez, Sterling said without turning. I understand you found something of mine. Yes, sir. Miguel's voice sounded small in the cavernous room. Sterling turned then, and Miguel was struck by how ordinary he appeared for someone with such extraordinary wealth and influence. Medium height, trim build, silver haircut conservatively. Only his eyes suggested something remarkable. Sharp, assessing, the pale blue of Arctic ice. Please sit. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Miguel perched on the edge, back straight, hands folded in his lap. Sterling settled into his own chair, placing the wallet between them on the desk-polished surface. $800, he said. 2 platinum cards, driver's license, and a photograph I particularly value. He withdrew a small, worn picture from the wallet. A young woman with Sterling's eyes, laughing at the camera. My daughter, Sterling explained, though Miguel hadn't asked. Taken before the accident. I'm sorry, sir, Miguel said, unsure what else to offer. Sterling replaced the photo carefully. 3 other employees found this wallet before you, Mr. Alvarez. None of them returned it intact. His gaze sharpened. Why did you? The question caught Miguel off guard. It was the right thing to do, sir. Even though no one would have known if you'd taken the money? Even though you likely need it more than I do? Miguel shifted uncomfortably. How much did this man know about him? My mother always said a man's character is what he does when no one is watching. Something like recognition flickered in Sterling's eyes. My father said something similar. He leaned back, studying Miguel. Tell me about yourself, Mr. Alvarez. Not what's in your employment file. Tell me who you are. For a moment, Miguel was speechless. No one in this building had ever asked him that. I came to America to build something better, sir. For myself and my family in Colombia. And has that happened? The unexpected question pierced through Miguel's practiced politeness. Not yet, sir, but I still believe it's possible. What did you do before you cleaned offices? I was an engineer. Civil infrastructure projects mostly. Small bridges, water systems. Sterling's eyebrows rose slightly. Yet you're cleaning my buildings and stocking shelves at... He glanced down at a tablet on his desk. Mendoza's Market. Miguel felt heat rise in his cheeks. The fact that Sterling knew about his second job was unsettling. My degree isn't recognized here. And without U.S. experience... So instead of building bridges, you empty trash cans. And still you return a wallet full of cash. Sterling's tone wasn't mocking, but thoughtful. Interesting. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Miguel resisted the urge to fill it with explanations or pleas. Finally, Sterling reached into a drawer and withdrew an envelope. A reward, he said, sliding it across the desk. Miguel didn't reach for it. That's not necessary, sir. I didn't return it for money. I know. Sterling smiled for the first time, transforming his austere features. That's precisely why you've earned it. Still, Miguel hesitated. May I ask why you left it there, sir? In your other office? Sterling's smile faded. What makes you think I left it deliberately? The security cameras, Miguel said simply. The wallet was partially visible on your desk. Someone like you doesn't make that kind of mistake. Sterling's laugh was sudden and genuine, observant as well as honest. Take the envelope, Mr. Alvarez. Consider it an investment, not charity. Miguel finally accepted it, tucking it away without looking inside. Thank you, sir. No, Sterling said, rising to indicate the meeting was over. Thank you for restoring a small measure of my faith in humanity. He extended his hand and Miguel stood to shake it. We'll be in touch. As Vivian escorted him back to the elevator, Miguel felt oddly light, as if something significant had shifted in the universe. It wasn't until he was alone in the service elevator that he opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. Miguel's legs nearly gave out beneath him. This was more than 4 months' combined salary. Enough to move out of his cousin's crowded apartment. Enough to send extra money to his mother. Enough to breathe just for a moment. But beneath the check was a business card with a handwritten note. Sometimes integrity is the most valuable qualification. Call this number tomorrow at 9 a.m. James. Jonathan Sterling watched the janitor's reaction on the security feed, satisfaction warming his chest. For months, he'd been searching for someone, anyone, within his organization who still operated from a core of genuine integrity. The data breach had shaken him more deeply than he'd admitted to his board or even to himself. Someone betrayed us, he murmured to the empty office. Someone I trusted. The breach had exposed proprietary technology to their main competitor, costing Sterling Enterprises the Pentagon contract they'd spent years pursuing. More painful than the financial loss was the personal betrayal. Someone on his executive team, someone he'd mentored, promoted, believed in, had sold him out. Did you find what you were looking for? Vivian asked from the doorway. Jonathan turned, unsurprised that she'd returned. In 15 years as his assistant, Vivian had developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate his needs. Perhaps, he said, nodding toward the screen where Miguel could be seen staring at the check in disbelief. What do we know about him? Vivian consulted her tablet. Miguel Alvarez, 34. Immigrated from Colombia 2 years ago. Engineering degree from Universidad Nacional with honors. Applied for 7 positions in our infrastructure division, but was rejected due to lack of U.S. experience. No criminal record. Perfect attendance record here despite working 2 jobs. Family? Mother and 2 sisters in Bogota. He sends nearly 60% of his income home each month. Jonathan absorbed this, a plan forming. And what do we know about his character? Vivian's expression softened slightly. The night cleaning supervisor says he's the only one who never complains, always stays late if needed, and leaves the offices immaculate. His background check was impeccable, unlike some others we've hired. The last part carried a pointed edge. They both knew she meant Trevor Harding, the chief strategy officer currently under covert investigation for the data breach. Trevor, with his Harvard MBA, his family connections, his flawless resume, and his gambling debts that had mysteriously disappeared 6 months ago. Set up a meeting with HR tomorrow. Jonathan decided, I want to create a position for Mr. Alvarez, something that utilizes his engineering background, but keeps him close to executive operations. You think he could help identify our leak? Vivian asked, always quick to follow his thinking. I think people reveal themselves around those they consider invisible. Jonathan turned back to the window, And our janitorial staff is practically invisible to most executives. Especially Trevor, Vivian murmured. I've seen him drop trash on the floor while the cleaning crew is literally in the room. Exactly. Jonathan's reflection smiled grimly in the glass. Let's see what Mr. Alvarez can learn when people think he's just there to empty the trash. Miguel couldn't sleep. Again. But tonight it wasn't worry keeping him awake, but shock. The check and business card lay on his nightstand where the wallet had been the night before. Equally out of place in his sparse surroundings, but infinitely more bewildering. His phone alarm showed 3:42 a.m. In just over 5 hours, he was supposed to call the number Jonathan Sterling had provided. For what purpose, he couldn't imagine. A formal thank you? Some kind of security debriefing? Or something else entirely? He reached for his phone, opening the browser to search Jonathan Sterling, CEO. Thousands of results appeared. Articles about Sterling's rise from middle-class roots to tech billionaire, his innovative approach to corporate culture, his famously private personal life after the tragic death of his wife and daughter in a boating accident 12 years ago. One particular headline caught Miguel's eye. Sterling Enterprises loses Pentagon contract after security breach. The article, dated 6 months earlier, detailed how proprietary technology had somehow been leaked to a competitor, costing the company an estimated $300 million contract. We have absolute confidence in our team and will identify the source of this breach, Sterling was quoted as saying. But reading between the lines, Miguel sensed fury and betrayal behind the corporate speak. Was that why Sterling had been testing employees with planted wallets? Looking for someone he could trust? Miguel set his phone down, mind racing. Whatever opportunity awaited him at 9 a.m., he sensed it was about more than his simple act of honesty. It was about a powerful man seeking something he'd lost, faith in the people around him. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Morning came too quickly and too slowly. Miguel called Mendoza's market to say he couldn't come in, the first time he'd ever missed a shift. He put on his best shirt and the tie his sister had sent, then caught an earlier train into Manhattan. He didn't want to be late for whatever awaited him. Finding a quiet corner in a coffee shop near Sterling Tower, Miguel dialed the number precisely at 9 a.m., heart hammering against his ribs. Mr. Alvarez, Vivian Chen answered on the first ring. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Please come to the executive floor at 10 a.m. May I ask what this is regarding? Miguel managed, his mouth suddenly dry. Mr. Sterling believes your skills are being underutilized, she replied cryptically. He has a proposition for you. The call ended, leaving Miguel staring at his phone. A proposition. The words could mean anything from a promotion to a bribe for his silence about something. But deep down, he knew Sterling wasn't testing him anymore. This was something else. At precisely 10 a.m., Miguel stepped off the executive elevator, this time wearing his best clothes rather than his janitor's uniform. Evans was nowhere to be seen, but Vivian waited in the reception area. Mr. Alvarez, she greeted him, professionally warm. This way, please. She led him not to Sterling's office, but to a conference room where 3 people waited. Jonathan Sterling, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair whom Miguel didn't recognize, and, his heart sank slightly, Rodriguez, his janitorial supervisor. Miguel, Rodriguez said, clearly uncomfortable in these surroundings. I didn't know you knew Mr. Sterling personally. He doesn't. Sterling interjected smoothly, gesturing for Miguel to sit. Not yet, but I believe we have an opportunity to change that. He nodded to the older woman. This is Elaine Winters, our VP of Human Resources. Mr. Alvarez, she acknowledged with a small smile. Your background is quite impressive. Miguel glanced between them, confusion mounting. Thank you, but I don't understand why I'm here. Sterling leaned forward, fingers steepled. I have a problem, Mr. Alvarez. Someone within my organization has betrayed my trust in a significant way. I need someone with demonstrable integrity to help me identify that person. Miguel blinked. And you think that's me? Sir, I'm just a janitor. No, Sterling corrected firmly. You're an engineer with an exceptional educational background who happens to be working as a janitor due to circumstances beyond your control. And yesterday, you proved you're also a man of character. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, and Miguel suddenly wondered if his supervisor had been one of the people who had failed Sterling's wallet test. What exactly are you proposing, sir? Miguel asked carefully. A new position, Sterling replied. Officially, you'll be joining our infrastructure assessment team as a junior engineer, utilizing your actual qualifications. Unofficially, you'll be my eyes and ears in areas of the company where executives don't bother to maintain their masks. Elaine slid a folder across the table. The compensation package is on page 3. We believe it's fair, but we're open to negotiation. Miguel opened the folder, and the figure at the bottom of the page made his breath catch. It was nearly 6 times his current combined income. This is very generous, he managed, but I don't understand what you expect me to do. Observe. Report directly to me. Continue being exactly who you are, a person of integrity in a world where that quality has become rare. Sterling's intense gaze never wavered. Can you do that, Mr. Alvarez? The question hung in the air between them. Miguel thought of his mother's struggle, his sister's dreams, his own fading hopes of using his education. He thought of the nights emptying trash bins while executives left confidential documents in plain view, assuming the cleaning staff was too ignorant or disinterested to notice. Yes, Miguel said finally. I can do that. Sterling's smile was genuine, but contained a hint of something harder. Excellent. You'll start Monday. Rodriguez, I believe you'll need to find a replacement for Mr. Alvarez's current position. The supervisor nodded quickly, clearly eager to escape the executive floor. When he had gone, Elaine excused herself as well, leaving Miguel alone with Sterling and Vivian. There's something you're not telling me, Miguel said, surprising himself with his boldness. Sterling raised an eyebrow. There are many things I'm not telling you, Mr. Alvarez. That's the nature of the relationship between a CEO and a new employee. You're asking me to spy on your executives. That goes beyond a normal employer-employee relationship. Vivian made a small noise that might have been suppressed laughter. Sterling's mouth twitched slightly. Fair point, he conceded. The truth is, Mr. Alvarez, 6 months ago, someone with high-level access stole proprietary technology and sold it to our main competitor. That breach cost this company hundreds of millions in contracts and potential future earnings. It put jobs at risk, including potentially yours. And you don't know who did it? Miguel asked. I have suspicions, but suspicions aren't proof. Sterling's expression hardened. I've spent 27 years building this company. I won't allow one person's greed to destroy it. Miguel nodded slowly. And you think this person might reveal something around me because to them, you're invisible. Vivian finished for him. No offense intended, none taken, Miguel replied. It's true. Most executives barely glance at maintenance staff. We're like furniture. Precisely, Sterling said, which makes you perfectly positioned to observe without being observed. You'll be joining the engineering team legitimately. Your qualifications more than justify the position. But you'll also have access to executive floors for special projects that I'll assign. The plan was both simple and audacious. Miguel would be hiding in plain sight, a newly promoted engineer occasionally called to executive floors for assessments, where he could observe the very people Sterling suspected. If I do this, Miguel said carefully, I need one condition. Sterling's eyebrows rose slightly. You're in no position to make demands, Mr. Alvarez. It's not a demand, sir. It's a request. Miguel straightened in his chair. If I help you find your corporate spy, I want a genuine chance to prove myself as an engineer, not just as your informant. For a long moment, Sterling studied him, expression unreadable. Then he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You continue to surprise me, Mr. Alvarez. Very well. Help me identify who betrayed this company, and I'll personally ensure your engineering career flourishes here. He extended his hand and Miguel shook it, sealing a pact that would change both their lives irrevocably. What neither man could anticipate was how their agreement would evolve into something far more meaningful than a transactional exchange, or how Miguel's simple act of returning a wallet would eventually save not just Jonathan Sterling's company, but the man himself. The transformation from night janitor to infrastructure engineer was disorienting. One day, Miguel was emptying trash bins. The next, he sat in a glass-walled office with his name on the door, reviewing blueprints for Sterling Enterprises' planned expansion into Austin. His new colleagues were cautiously welcoming, though he caught the occasional curious glance or whispered conversation. His rapid promotion had raised eyebrows, particularly since several American engineers had been passed over. Don't mind them, said Nadia Patel, the team lead who'd been assigned as his mentor. Sterling has always made unconventional hiring decisions. When he sees potential, he moves fast. Miguel nodded, not mentioning his other role. As far as the engineering department knew, he'd impressed Sterling with some aspect of his background or experience. Only Vivian and Sterling himself knew the truth. 3 times during his first 2 weeks, Miguel was called to the executive floor to assess structural elements that Sterling claimed needed expert opinion. Each time he was introduced to different members of the executive team, who largely ignored him as he examined crown molding or flooring that had suddenly become concerning to the CEO. Trevor Harding, our chief strategy officer, Sterling had introduced during the second such visit. Trevor, this is Miguel Alvarez, our new infrastructure specialist. Harding, a polished man in his 40s, with the confident air of old money, had barely glanced at Miguel. Charmed, Jonathan, about the Singapore acquisition. In a moment, Sterling had replied. Miguel needs to examine the support beams in here. Apparently, there's been some concern about structural integrity. Harding had rolled his eyes slightly when Sterling looked away, his expression clearly communicating what he thought about being interrupted for something so trivial. But Miguel had dutifully examined the perfectly sound beams, noting how Harding immediately forgot his presence and continued discussing sensitive acquisition details with Sterling. Now sitting in Sterling's office for their first private debriefing, Miguel recounted these observations. Harding speaks quite openly when I'm in the room, he reported. Yesterday, he was on the phone discussing personal finances, something about a new vacation property in Aspen. Sterling nodded, making notes. What about Diane Lowell, the CFO? Very cautious. She stops conversations when maintenance or support staff enter, closes her laptop when people walk behind her. Miguel hesitated. She seems hypervigilant. That's her nature, Sterling replied. Diane has been with me for 18 years. She's suspicious of everyone, which makes her excellent at her job and unlikely as our leak. He leaned back in his chair. What else? Peter Chen. I assume he's related to Miss Chen? Miguel nodded toward Vivian's desk outside the office. Her cousin, Sterling confirmed. Our chief technology officer. He treats service staff with respect, always says thank you. But he seems anxious, checking his phone constantly, startling when doors open unexpectedly. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Interesting. The most revealing was James Morrison. Miguel continued. He made a call he thought was private while I was measuring baseboards in his office. He's heavily invested in quantum dynamics. Sterling sat forward abruptly. Our main competitor? The one who received our stolen technology? Miguel nodded. He was discussing how their stock would go through the roof when the military contract is announced. A cold smile spread across Sterling's face. You've been with us 2 weeks, Mr. Alvarez, and you've already provided more useful intelligence than 6 months of internal investigations. Miguel shifted uncomfortably under the praise. I'm just reporting what I observe, which is precisely what makes you valuable. People show their true nature when they think no one important is watching. Sterling's expression darkened. Morrison has been with this company for 15 years. I attended his wedding. The betrayal in Sterling's voice was palpable. Miguel felt a twinge of sympathy for this powerful man who'd been deceived by someone he trusted. I need proof. Sterling continued, more to himself than to Miguel. Suspicion isn't enough. I need to catch him in the act. What will you do when you have proof? Miguel asked carefully. Sterling's eyes, when they met his, were winter cold. Whatever is necessary to protect what I've built. The answer sent a chill down Miguel's spine. Weeks passed, and Miguel settled into a dual routine. Legitimate engineering work by day, covert observation by night. His colleagues in infrastructure had warmed to him as his expertise became evident. Even Rodriguez, his former supervisor, now nodded respectfully when they passed in hallways. The only person who seemed consistently suspicious was Evans, the security guard, who watched Miguel with narrowed eyes whenever he accessed executive floors. But with Sterling's explicit authorization, there was little Evans could do but seethe. Meanwhile, Miguel's personal life transformed. He'd moved from his cousin's crowded apartment to a small but pleasant one-bedroom in Astoria. He'd increased the money he sent home, allowing his mother to move to a better neighborhood and his youngest sister to focus on university without working part-time. For the first time since arriving in America, Miguel felt the ground solidifying beneath his feet. Yet his growing closeness to Sterling brought complications he hadn't anticipated. The CEO began inviting him to private dinners at his penthouse apartment, ostensibly to discuss observations but increasingly veering into personal territory. Sterling, it seemed, was as lonely as he was powerful. A widower whose entire life had narrowed to his company after the deaths of his wife and daughter. Sophia would have been 26 now, Sterling said one evening, showing Miguel the same photograph from his wallet. They sat in Sterling's minimalist living room, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena, my wife, always said Sophia had my stubbornness in her heart. She's beautiful, Miguel said softly. Both of them. Sterling nodded, his usual sharpness softened by memory and expensive scotch. The accident happened on a perfect day. That's what I remember most. How goddamn perfect the weather was. Blue skies, gentle breeze. Elena took Sophia sailing to celebrate her 14th birthday. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. The investigation said a sudden squall overturned the boat. Elena was an experienced sailor, but he trailed off and Miguel didn't press. They sat in companionable silence until Sterling spoke again. You remind me of myself at your age, Miguel. Determined, principled. I built Sterling Enterprises from nothing because I refused to compromise. On quality, on ethics, on the people I hired. His expression hardened, which makes this betrayal all the more unforgivable. Miguel understood then that Sterling's obsession with finding the corporate spy went beyond business. It was personal, a betrayal of the family he'd created to replace the one he'd lost. We'll find the proof you need, Miguel assured him. Morrison has grown careless. Yesterday, he took a call in the break room about the final transfer. Sterling nodded, but his mind seemed elsewhere. Do you have family, Miguel? Beyond your mother and sisters? No, sir. No wife or children, if that's what you mean. Call me Jonathan, please. At least when we're not in the office. Sterling, Jonathan refilled their glasses. Is there someone waiting for you back in Colombia? Miguel shook his head. My work consumed most of my time. And then coming here, he shrugged. The American dream doesn't leave much room for romance. Jonathan's laugh held little humor. The American dream, is that what brought you here? A myth created to lure talented people to our shores? It's not a myth if you make it real, Miguel countered. And with respect, sir, Jonathan, I've seen more of its promise fulfilled in the past month than in my first 2 years here. Because of me, Jonathan said, studying him over the rim of his glass. Because I recognized what others missed. Yes, Miguel acknowledged. But also because I didn't give up. Because I returned your wallet instead of taking what wasn't mine. Jonathan's expression softened into something like affection. Your mother raised a good man, Miguel Alvarez. So did yours, it seems. The evening ended shortly after, Jonathan calling his driver to take Miguel home. But as they shook hands at the door, Jonathan held on a moment longer than necessary. I consider you a friend, Miguel. Perhaps my only real one at the moment. I hope that doesn't complicate things. Miguel felt the weight of the older man's loneliness, his isolation at the top of the empire he'd built. It doesn't complicate anything for me. But as the elevator descended, Miguel wondered if that was true. Jonathan Sterling was no longer just his employer, but a man he genuinely respected, perhaps even cared for. And that did complicate the mission to expose someone Jonathan had once trusted just as much. The evidence accumulated over the following weeks. James Morrison, Jonathan's chief marketing officer and supposed friend, had indeed been selling company secrets to Quantum Dynamics. Bank records Vivian quietly obtained showed suspicious deposits coinciding with leaked information. Digital trails led back to Morrison's private devices. And Miguel, now accepted as a fixture on executive floors, had personally overheard Morrison assuring someone on the phone that the final technical specifications will be transmitted this week. Jonathan called an emergency meeting with just Miguel and Vivian present. His office blinds were drawn, his expression glacial. We have him, he said without preamble. Morrison is planning to transfer the complete specifications for our quantum encryption algorithm to Quantum Dynamics tomorrow night. How do you know the exact timing? Miguel asked. Because I had AT install monitoring software on his devices, Jonathan replied. Technically illegal without his knowledge, which is why this stays between us. Miguel shifted uncomfortably. What's the plan? We catch him in the act. Tomorrow night, Morrison believes I'll be in Chicago for meetings. Instead, I'll be here, with security ready to escort him from the building. Jonathan's voice was flat. Then we contact the FBI. Industrial espionage carries significant federal penalties. Vivian, ever practical, was already typing on her tablet. I've rescheduled your Chicago meetings. Should I alert building security? No, Jonathan said firmly. Just Evans. He's the only one I trust with this. Miguel couldn't hide his surprise. Evans. He seems like an officious bully? Jonathan finished with a grim smile. He is, but he's also fiercely loyal to this company. Unlike our friend Morrison, the plan was set. The following evening, Morrison would believe himself alone in the executive suite, while Jonathan was supposedly in Chicago. Miguel would monitor from the adjacent conference room while Jonathan and Evans waited for Morrison to access the secure server containing the encryption algorithm. As Miguel rose to leave, Jonathan stopped him with a hand on his arm. Thank you, Miguel. I won't forget what you've done. The gratitude in his eyes made Miguel's chest tighten. I just did what was right. which makes you extraordinary in today's world. Jonathan's hand lingered. When this is over, I'd like to discuss your future here. I have plans for you beyond this. Detective work. Miguel nodded, both pleased and troubled by Jonathan's intensity. Over the past months, he'd grown to care deeply about the older man's approval, perhaps too deeply for a professional relationship. The line between his role as Jonathan's eyes and ears and his growing personal connection to the CEO had blurred considerably. That night, Miguel barely slept, his mind replaying possible scenarios for Morrison's capture. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes, but adrenaline kept him alert as he moved through his regular engineering duties. At 7 p.m., most employees had departed. Miguel made his way to the executive floor, where Vivian waited with a key card for the conference room adjoining Morrison's office. The monitoring equipment is already set up, she explained, her usual composure slightly strained. Mr. Sterling and Evans are positioned in the security office. Morrison is working late, as expected. Hiya. Have you known, Miguel asked suddenly, about Morrison? This whole time? Vivian's expression remained neutral. I've suspected. Jonathan doesn't trust easily, but when he does, it's absolute. Morrison took advantage of that. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. It nearly destroyed him when the breach was discovered. Not the financial loss, the personal betrayal. Miguel nodded, understanding better now why Jonathan had become so fixated on finding the traitor. He seems attached to me. Is that normal? Vivian studied him for a moment before answering. No, it's not. Jonathan hasn't let anyone close since Elena and Sophia died. Until you. She handed him the key card. Be careful with his trust, Mr. Alvarez. It's more fragile than it appears. With that cryptic warning, she left him standing outside the conference room, the weight of Jonathan's expectations heavy on his shoulders. The monitoring setup was sophisticated. Small cameras positioned to capture Morrison's office from multiple angles, audio feeds, and a direct view of his computer screen. Miguel settled in to wait, checking the secure line to Jonathan in the security office. I'm in position, he reported quietly. Good. Jonathan's voice came through clearly. Morrison is still at his desk. The algorithm is stored on a secured server that can only be accessed from executive terminals. When he attempts to download it, we'll have him. The minutes stretched into hours. Morrison made phone calls, worked on presentations, ordered dinner. Nothing suspicious. By 10 p.m., Miguel's eyes burned from staring at the monitors. Something's wrong, Jonathan muttered through the comm link. He should have made his move by now. As if on cue, Morrison rose from his desk and stretched. Miguel tensed, but the executive merely walked to his private bathroom. When he emerged a few minutes later, however, his demeanor had changed. He moved with purpose, checking his watch before sitting down at his computer again. Here we go. Jonathan breathed. Morrison typed rapidly, accessing directories that prompted security warnings. He inserted a flash drive into his computer. Got him, Jonathan said, his voice tight with satisfaction. Evans, move in. Miguel watched the screens as Morrison began downloading files. The office door burst open, Evans and two security guards entering with Jonathan right behind them. The look of shock on Morrison's face would have been comical in any other circumstance. Jonathan, I thought you were in Chicago. Clearly, Jonathan replied coldly. Remove the drive, James. Morrison's expression shifted from shock to calculation. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you're stealing proprietary technology to sell to our competitors. Again, Jonathan's voice was steel. We have everything, James. The bank transfers, the communication with quantum dynamics. Your little arrangement has come to an end. Morrison's face drained of color. Jonathan, please. We've been friends for 15 years. Whatever you think I've done, friends don't betray each other for profit. Jonathan nodded to Evans. Escort Mr. Morrison from the building. His access is revoked, effective immediately. The FBI will contact him tomorrow. As Evans moved to take Morrison's arm, the executive's expression hardened. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so perfect, so above it all. Did you tell your new pet project about how you built this company? The corners you cut? The people you stepped on? Jonathan didn't flinch. Take him out. Miguel watched the screens as Morrison was led away, still hurling accusations. When the office stood empty, he sank back in his chair, adrenaline draining. It was over. They had caught the corporate spy, saved the company's technology, fulfilled the mission. So why did he feel so hollow? The conference room door opened and Jonathan entered, looking both triumphant and exhausted. We did it, he said simply. Miguel nodded. What happens now? Now? Jonathan's smile was grim. Now we rebuild what Morrison tried to destroy. Starting tomorrow, I want you to transition fully to engineering. No more spy games. He approached Miguel, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've proven yourself beyond my highest expectations. The warmth in Jonathan's eyes made Miguel look away. I just did what you asked. You did far more than that. Jonathan's voice softened. You showed me I could trust again. The words hung between them, laden with meaning Miguel wasn't sure how to interpret. He had come to care for Jonathan, his brilliance, his drive, his wounded heart beneath the corporate armor. But Morrison's parting words echoed uncomfortably. Was there truth to what Morrison said? He asked quietly. About how you built the company? Jonathan's expression closed slightly. Every successful company has chapters its founder isn't proud of. Early on, I made decisions I've spent years atoning for. His eyes met Miguel's directly. But I never betrayed a friend for profit. That's the difference between Morrison and me. Miguel nodded, wanting to believe him. I should go. It's late. Stay, Jonathan said, the words somewhere between a command and a plea. Have a drink with me. Celebrate our victory. And despite his misgivings, Miguel found himself following Jonathan to his office, where expensive scotch awaited and the Manhattan skyline glittered like promises in the darkness beyond. The morning newspapers carried the story, Sterling Enterprises executive arrested for industrial espionage. Morrison's fall was swift and complete. The FBI had found damning evidence in his home, and Quantum Dynamics was already distancing itself, claiming no knowledge of his activities. Miguel watched the coverage from his apartment, feeling strangely detached. His phone had been ringing since dawn, colleagues seeking gossip, reporters somehow finding his number, even his mother calling from Colombia after seeing the story on international news. The last call had been from Jonathan, asking him to come to the penthouse that evening. A private celebration, he'd said. You deserve recognition for your role in this, even if it must remain confidential. Now as evening approached, Miguel dressed carefully in the new suit Jonathan had insisted on having tailored for him last month. The man's generosity had been overwhelming. The promotion, the raises, the personal gifts. Mentorship had evolved into something more complex, a relationship that defied easy categorization. Miguel's phone buzzed with a text from the car service Jonathan had sent. As he rode the elevator down, he caught his reflection in the polished doors. A different man than the janitor who had found a wallet 8 months ago. Better dressed, certainly, better paid, but changed in deeper ways too. The car delivered him to Jonathan's building, where the doorman nodded in recognition. Mr. Sterling is expecting you, Mr. Alvarez. The penthouse was aglow with soft lighting when Miguel entered. Jonathan greeted him with a warm embrace, dressed casually in a way few at the company ever saw him. The man of the hour, Jonathan said, leading him to the living room where champagne waited. We couldn't have exposed Morrison without you. Miguel accepted a flute, the bubbles catching the light. I'm glad it's over. Over and beginning, Jonathan corrected, raising his glass. To new chapters. They drank, and Jonathan guided him to the balcony where an intimate dinner had been set. The view was spectacular. Manhattan spread before them like a kingdom of light. I've been thinking about your future, Jonathan said as they ate. I want to create a new position, Vice President of Infrastructure Integrity. You'd oversee not just physical structures, but the integrity of our systems, our people. Miguel nearly choked on his wine. That's a significant promotion from junior engineer. You've proven yourself uniquely qualified. Jonathan leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. You understand what most don't, that a company's strength lies in its moral foundation, not just its bottom line. The offer was extraordinary, beyond anything Miguel had dreamed possible when he'd arrived in America with an engineering degree and desperate hope. Yet something felt wrong, too fast, too much, too entwined with his personal connection to Jonathan. I'm honored, he said carefully, but I haven't earned a vice presidency. I've barely established myself as an engineer here. Jonathan waved this away. Titles are arbitrary. I create them as needed for the right people. The board might disagree. I control the board. Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Morrison's betrayal has shown me I need people I can trust in key positions. People like you, Miguel. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Miguel remained unsettled. By the time dessert arrived, Jonathan had moved his chair closer, their knees occasionally touching beneath the table. The champagne and wine had softened the edges of the evening, but Miguel maintained his clarity. There's something I need to ask you, he said finally, setting down his fork. When Morrison was being escorted out, he said things about how you built the company. You said there were chapters you weren't proud of. Jonathan's expression cooled slightly. Is this really the topic for our celebration? I need to know. Miguel persisted gently. If I'm to take a leadership role, I should understand the company's history. The real history. For a long moment, Jonathan studied him, calculation visible behind his eyes. Then he sighed, rising to retrieve a decanter of scotch from inside. When he returned, his demeanor had changed. Less the triumphant CEO, more the weary man beneath. 27 years ago, I had nothing but an idea and student loan debt. He began, pouring them each a measure of amber liquid. My first investor was a man named Robert Kessler. He believed in me when no one else would. Jonathan stared out at the city lights. 5 years in, when we were on the verge of our first major breakthrough, Robert wanted to take the company in a direction I disagreed with. Defense contracts I felt violated our founding principles. We fought bitterly. Miguel sipped his scotch, watching Jonathan's face in profile. I found a technicality in our incorporation documents. Jonathan continued, his voice distant. A way to force him out. It was legally sound, but ethically. He shook his head. Robert had a heart attack 3 weeks later. His wife always blamed me for the stress I caused him. Did you try to make amends? I sent flowers to the funeral. Jonathan's laugh held no humor. I was 28 and ruthless in my conviction that I was right. By the time I recognized my moral failure, it was too late. Robert was gone, and his family wanted nothing to do with me or my guilt money. He turned to face Miguel fully. There are other stories. Competitors I destroyed rather than merely defeated. Employees whose innovations I claimed as company property under contracts they hadn't fully understood. I built this company with brilliant determination and occasionally cruel calculation. The admission hung between them. Miguel absorbed it, surprised not by the revelation, but by Jonathan's willingness to share it. Why tell me this now? Because you asked. Because you deserve the truth. Jonathan moved closer. And because I've changed, Miguel. Elena changed me first. Her goodness was a mirror I couldn't hide from. Then losing her and Sophia, his voice caught. When everything that matters is taken from you, you recognize what's truly important. His hand found Miguel's on the table. Integrity, connection, legacy. That's why Morrison's betrayal cut so deeply. And why finding someone I can trust means everything. The touch was warm, intentional. Miguel didn't pull away but didn't reciprocate either. And that's why you want to promote me? Because you trust me? Because you remind me of who I wanted to be before ambition corrupted me. Jonathan's eyes held his. You returned a wallet when you thought no one was watching. That single act of integrity revealed your character in a way years of interviews never could. Miguel felt the weight of Jonathan's regard, his admiration, his need, his loneliness. It was heady and frightening. I should go, he said softly, withdrawing his hand. It's getting late. Disappointment flickered across Jonathan's face, quickly masked. Of course. Think about the position. We can discuss details next week. At the door, Jonathan held his gaze a moment too long. Thank you, Miguel. Not just for helping catch Morrison, but for showing me that integrity still exists in this cynical world. Miguel nodded, unable to find adequate words. As the elevator descended, he leaned against the wall, emotions churning. Jonathan Sterling was offering him everything he'd come to America hoping to find. Professional recognition, financial security, meaningful work. So why did it feel like accepting would cost him something essential? The following week brought chaos to Sterling Enterprises. News of Morrison's arrest triggered market speculation, competitor maneuvering, and internal power struggles. Jonathan was rarely seen, locked in crisis meetings with the board and legal team. Miguel threw himself into his engineering work, grateful for the reprieve from Jonathan's intense focus. The proposed vice presidency remained unmentioned, though Vivian had sent him preliminary paperwork to review at his convenience. On Friday afternoon, as Miguel was completing structural assessments for the Austin expansion, his office phone rang. Mr. Alvarez, Evan's gruff voice was unmistakable. Your presence is requested in the security office immediately. Miguel's stomach tightened. May I ask why? Mr. Sterling's instructions. The line went dead. The security suite occupied a windowless section of the basement level. Miguel had never been there before. Evans waited outside, expression even more sour than usual. What's this about? Miguel asked as Evans scanned his badge for entry. Not my place to say, the guard replied, holding the door. Inside, the security office was a maze of monitors showing feeds from throughout the building. In the center, Jonathan stood with two men Miguel didn't recognize, all three examining a screen intently. Miguel, Jonathan acknowledged without warmth. Thank you for coming. Something was wrong. Jonathan's demeanor was formal, distant, nothing like their last interaction. These gentlemen are from the FBI's Cybercrime Division. Jonathan continued, "They have some questions about access to our servers." Miguel's confusion must have shown on his face. One of the agents stepped forward. "Sir Alvarez, our investigation into James Morrison's activities has revealed irregular access patterns from your credentials. Can you explain why you accessed the quantum encryption server at 2:13 a.m. last Tuesday?" The question made no sense. "I didn't. I was home asleep." "Your login credentials were used," the agent persisted, "from a terminal in the engineering department." Miguel looked to Jonathan, whose expression remained unreadable. "There must be a mistake." "I would never. We have the digital records," the second agent interrupted, "and security footage of someone entering the building using your badge at 1:47 a.m. "That's impossible," Miguel insisted, panic rising. "I was home. My badge was with me." Jonathan finally spoke. "Show him the footage, Agent Keller." The screen displayed grainy, nighttime video of Sterling Enterprises' staff entrance. A figure with Miguel's build, face obscured by a hood, swiped a badge and entered. "That's not me," Miguel said, his mouth dry. "I don't even own a jacket like that." "The system logged your badge," Evans stated flatly. Miguel turned to Jonathan, desperate for the man who had trusted him, who had called him friend, who had invited him into his home. "Jonathan, you know I wouldn't do this. After everything, what I know," Jonathan cut him off coldly. "Is that Morrison couldn't have acted alone? He needed someone with engineering access to retrieve certain technical specifications. His eyes were ice. Someone I trusted implicitly." The betrayal cut deeper than Miguel could have imagined. After 8 months of building trust, of personal confidences shared, of what he had thought was genuine connection, Jonathan believed he was a traitor. "Check my apartment," Miguel said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Check my bank accounts. I have nothing to hide. We have warrants for both," the first agent confirmed. "Agents are searching your residence now." The room tilted slightly. This was really happening. "I didn't do this," Miguel said again, looking directly at Jonathan. "Someone is setting me up." For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered in Jonathan's eyes. Then it hardened into resolution. "Take him to the conference room," he instructed Evans. "Keep him there until the search is complete." As Evans led him away, Miguel caught a final glimpse of Jonathan, the man who had recognized his integrity when he returned a wallet, now believing him capable of the same betrayal as Morrison. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. The conference room felt like a prison cell despite its expensive furnishings. Evans stationed himself outside the door, visible through the glass wall. Inside, Miguel paced, mind racing. Someone had framed him, but who and why? Morrison was the obvious suspect, setting up an accomplice to take the fall with him. But Morrison was in federal custody with no access to Sterling Enterprises systems. The only other person with both motive and opportunity was... The thought stopped Miguel cold. Surely Jonathan wouldn't frame him after everything they'd shared. Yet the CEO's business history, by his own admission, included ruthless elimination of perceived threats. Had Miguel somehow become a threat? The intimacy of their relationship, Jonathan's increasingly personal interest, had Miguel's gentle rejection at the penthouse triggered something darker? The door opened and Vivian entered, her expression grave. "They found something in your apartment," she said without preamble. A flash drive containing portions of the encryption algorithm, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Miguel felt the blood drain from his face. "That's not possible. I don't own any hollowed-out books." "They have photographs." She placed her tablet on the table, displaying images of what appeared to be his bookshelf, a copy of 100 Years of Solitude. With its center carved out, a small drive nestled inside. "That's not mine," Miguel insisted, desperation mounting. "Someone planted it. You have to believe me." Vivian studied him, her professional mask slipping slightly to reveal what might have been doubt. "Why would someone frame you, Miguel?" "I don't know." The frustration burst out of him. "Maybe Morrison had an accomplice we didn't identify. Maybe someone resents my promotion. Maybe..." He stopped, the unthinkable accusation hanging unspoken. Vivian's gaze sharpened. "Maybe what?" Miguel sank into a chair. "Nothing. It doesn't matter. No one will believe me anyway." She watched him for a long moment before speaking again. "Jonathan is disturbed by this development. He trusted you completely. And now he thinks I betrayed him, just like Morrison." Miguel laughed bitterly. The perfect symmetry. The janitor he elevated, secretly stealing from him all along. "Is that what happened?" Vivian asked quietly. "No." Miguel slammed his palm on the table. "I would never betray him. Not after everything he's done for me. Not after... He broke off, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Vivian sat across from him, her expression softening slightly. Not after what, Miguel? He met her gaze directly. Not after I grew to care for him. As a mentor, as a friend. The words felt inadequate for the complex bond that had formed between them. Something shifted in Vivian's demeanor. The FBI agents want to take you in for formal questioning. I've persuaded Jonathan to wait until morning, to give you one night to offer an explanation. Hope flickered faintly. Why would you do that? Because in 15 years, I've never seen Jonathan connect with anyone the way he has with you. She rose to leave. Don't make me regret this intervention, Mr. Alvarez. After she left, Miguel sat motionless, mind racing through possibilities. Someone had gone to elaborate lengths to frame him, cloning his badge, planting evidence in his apartment. Who had that level of access and technical skill? A chilling thought formed. What if the real traitor wasn't Morrison at all? What if framing Morrison had been phase 1, and framing Miguel was phase 2? He needed access to a computer, needed to review the security footage himself. But Evans remained stationed outside, watching his every move. As night fell, Miguel was allowed a bathroom break and a sandwich. No phone, no computer, no contact with the outside world. He was effectively a prisoner in the building where, just days earlier, he had been celebrated as a hero. Around midnight, the lights in the outer office areas dimmed. Evans remained at his post, but his posture had relaxed, his attention occasionally drifting to his phone. Miguel watched, calculating. If he could just reach a computer terminal, he might find something to prove his innocence. The opportunity came at 1:23 a.m. Evans received a call, spoke briefly, then looked through the glass at Miguel. Stay put, he mouthed before disappearing down the hall. Miguel waited 10 seconds, then slipped out of the conference room. He moved swiftly through the darkened office, making for the nearest engineering terminal. His badge wouldn't work. It had surely been deactivated, but he knew Kevin Chang's password from watching him log in countless times. The computer accepted Kevin's credentials. Miguel navigated quickly to the security server, using the backdoor access Jonathan himself had shown him during the Morrison investigation. If someone had framed him, there might be evidence in the original footage. He found the file from Tuesday night and began examining it frame by frame. The hooded figure entering the building matched his height and build precisely, a careful choice of double. The badge swipe registered as Miguel's ID number, but there was something odd about the timestamp. Miguel zoomed in, enhanced the image. The security system showed 1:47 a.m., but the watch visible on the imposter's wrist showed 11:23 p.m. Gotcha, Miguel whispered. The footage had been altered, spliced together from different times. He downloaded the file to examine further, looking for other inconsistencies. He was so focused that he didn't hear the approaching footsteps until it was too late. What the hell do you think you're doing? Evan's voice cut through the silence. Miguel turned slowly, hands raised. Finding the truth. The security footage has been tampered with. Evans advanced, hand moving to the weapon at his hip. Step away from the computer. Look for yourself, Miguel pleaded. The timestamps don't match. Someone edited the footage to frame me. Save it for the FBI, Evans growled, grabbing Miguel's arm. Mr. Sterling was right not to trust you. As Evans reached for his radio, Miguel made a split-second decision. He couldn't go to federal prison for a crime he didn't commit. With a quick pivot, he broke Evans' grip and ran for the stairwell. The guard's shouts echoed behind him as Miguel took the stairs 2 at a time, racing upward rather than down. The building's ground floor would be sealed tight, but he knew the executive floor had a private elevator that operated with a simple code. A code he'd seen Jonathan use. Alarms began to sound as he burst onto the 50th floor. Emergency lights cast ghostly shadows across the familiar space. Miguel sprinted for Jonathan's office, where the private elevator waited. He skidded to a stop at the sight of a figure silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. I thought you might come here, Jonathan said quietly, turning to face him. It seems I underestimated your resourcefulness. Again. Miguel remained by the door, ready to flee. The security footage was edited. The timestamps don't match. Someone is framing me, Jonathan. Someone with intimate knowledge of our security systems. Someone I trusted with sensitive access. Jonathan's voice was eerily calm. Someone like you. Or someone like Trevor Harding, Miguel countered. Your chief strategy officer. The man who's been moving money offshore for months. The man who has been meeting secretly with Quantum Dynamics' CEO. Jonathan went very still. What are you talking about? While you had me watching Morrison, I noticed Harding's suspicious behavior too. I've been tracking him independently. Miguel took a cautious step forward. He's the one who accessed the server using my credentials. He planted the evidence in my apartment. Prove it, Jonathan demanded, but doubt had crept into his voice. I can, if you give me the chance. Miguel held Jonathan's gaze. You trusted me once because I returned your wallet when I thought no one was watching. Trust me now when everyone is. For a long moment, neither man moved. Security personnel could be heard gathering in the hallway outside. Miguel's future, prison or freedom, hung on Jonathan's decision. Mr. Sterling, Evans called through the door. We know he's in there. FBI agents are on their way. Jonathan studied Miguel's face as if searching for something essential. Then with deliberate movements, he crossed to his desk and pressed a button beneath its surface. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a hidden passage. My private exit, Jonathan explained. It leads to a service elevator connected to the parking garage. He held out a key card. This will get you out of the building. Miguel stared at the offered escape. I'm not running. I'm innocent. I know. Jonathan's voice had softened. But you need time to prove it. Time you won't have if the FBI takes you now. You believe me? Miguel asked, hardly daring to hope. I don't know what to believe anymore, Jonathan admitted. But I know that if you're guilty, you would have been gone hours ago. And if you're innocent, his expression tightened with something like pain. Then I've failed you profoundly. The pounding on the door grew more insistent. Jonathan pressed the key card into Miguel's hand. Go. Find the proof. Clear your name. Their fingers touched, lingered, and then come back to me. The words held a promise Miguel couldn't fully interpret. But as shouts and the sound of a key in the lock reached them, he made his choice. He took the card, stepped into the hidden passage, and looked back once at the man who had transformed his life. I'll prove it wasn't me, he promised, and I'll find who really betrayed you. The panel slid closed as the office door burst open, sealing Miguel's path forward and cutting off his view of Jonathan facing the consequences of letting him escape. The service elevator deposited Miguel in a deserted section of the parking garage. Using Jonathan's key card, he slipped past the security checkpoint and into the night, a fugitive from the very company that had once elevated him from invisibility to prominence. But he carried with him the corrupted security footage, a lead on Trevor Harding's activities, and something even more valuable, Jonathan Sterling's fragile, renewed trust. It wasn't much to work with, but for a man who had built a life from nothing before, it would have to be enough. Miguel melted into the New York night, determined to uncover the truth in return, not just to clear his name, but to heal the breach with the man whose faith in him had wavered but not broken completely. The man who had seen his integrity in a returned wallet, and who might yet recognize it again in his refusal to abandon the truth, no matter the cost. The truth, when Miguel finally uncovered it 3 weeks later, was both simpler and more complex than he had imagined. Trevor Harding had indeed framed both Morrison and Miguel, but he hadn't acted alone. Evans, the security guard Jonathan had trusted implicitly, had been his accomplice, manipulating security footage and planting evidence. Their motive wasn't merely financial gain, but a calculated corporate takeover. Harding had orchestrated the entire scheme to destroy Jonathan's faith in his closest allies, isolating him professionally and emotionally until he would be vulnerable to a board coup that Harding had been quietly arranging for months. Miguel discovered the plot while hiding in a small motel in Queens, using burner phones and public computers to avoid detection. The downloaded security footage had been his first breakthrough. Digital analysis revealed multiple editing points and compression artifacts consistent with tampering. From there, he had traced Harding's communications, using techniques he learned during his time as Jonathan's unofficial investigator. The evidence accumulated: offshore accounts, secret meetings, board members being privately approached with promises of increased power once Jonathan was removed. The most damning evidence came from Evans himself. Desperate for money to cover gambling debts similar to Morrison's, the security chief had kept insurance, recordings of his conversations with Harding detailing every aspect of their scheme. It had taken Miguel 3 weeks of living in shadows, calling in favors from former janitorial colleagues who still had access to the building, and one heart-stopping infiltration of Evans' apartment to gather everything he needed. Now, as he sat across from FBI agent Keller in a nondescript federal building, the full story was finally emerging. So Harding framed Morrison for the initial data breach, Keller summarized, reviewing the evidence Miguel had provided. Then used that situation to position himself as Sterling's trusted advisor, while simultaneously framing you as a second accomplice. Yes, Miguel confirmed. Morrison was guilty of other improprieties, but not the data theft. Harding chose him as the first scapegoat because of existing suspicions about his financial problems. And you were the second target because of your close relationship with Sterling. Keller's expression remained neutral, but his tone suggested he understood the personal dimensions involved. Miguel nodded. Harding saw me as a threat to his influence over Jonathan, Mr. Sterling. He knew framing me would devastate Jonathan personally while further isolating him professionally, with the ultimate goal being a board takeover that would install Harding as CEO. Keller closed the file. We have enough here to arrest both Harding and Evans. The U.S. Attorney will want to speak with you directly about testimony. And my status? Miguel asked carefully. The charges against me? Being dropped as we speak. Keller actually smiled slightly. You're a free man, Mr. Alvarez. Though I wouldn't recommend breaking out of corporate custody as a general practice. Relief washed through Miguel, leaving him lightheaded. After weeks of looking over his shoulder, of sleeping in 2-hour increments, of constant fear, it was over. His name would be cleared. There's one more thing, he said, reaching into his jacket. This USB drive contains Jonathan's Mr. Sterling's private corporate files. Harding was planning to transfer them to Quantum Dynamics next week. I retrieved them from his home office 2 days ago. Keller raised an eyebrow. Breaking and entering is still a crime, Mr. Alvarez. I had permission to be in the building, Miguel replied carefully. As a consultant, the agent's mouth twitched. I'll add these to the evidence. Is there anything else you haven't told me? Miguel thought of the other thing he'd discovered in Harding's files. Evidence that Jonathan's wife and daughter's accident 12 years ago might not have been an accident at all. That information wasn't relevant to the current case, but it would shatter Jonathan's world all over again. No, he answered. That's everything pertinent to this investigation. Keller seemed to sense the omission but didn't press. Someone from Sterling Enterprises has been calling daily for updates on your case. Muzinas Chen. Would you like me to inform her of these developments? Miguel's heart quickened. No, thank you. I'd prefer to do that myself. Jonathan Sterling stood at his office window, watching rain streak down the glass. 3 weeks had passed since Miguel's escape. 3 weeks of cooperating with FBI investigations, managing board concerns, and privately, desperately hoping that his faith in Miguel hadn't been misplaced. He had replayed their last conversation countless times. The look in Miguel's eyes, not guilt, but hurt at being doubted. The evidence against him had seemed irrefutable, yet Jonathan had let him go. An action that had required explanation to federal authorities and raised questions about his judgment. Vivian entered without knocking, her usual composure noticeably altered. They've arrested Harding and Evans, she announced without preamble. Just now in the building. Jonathan turned slowly. On what charges? Corporate espionage. Fraud. Conspiracy. Her voice softened slightly. Miguel provided the evidence. He's been cleared of all charges. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, relief and shame washing through him in equal measure. Where is he now? FBI headquarters finishing his statement. Vivian approached, placing a file on his desk. This contains everything. Harding was planning a board coup. He framed Morrison for the initial breach, then targeted Miguel because of his proximity to you. The delicate phrasing wasn't lost on Jonathan. His growing attachment to Miguel had been obvious enough for Harding to identify it as a vulnerability. A connection that, if severed, would leave Jonathan emotionally compromised. Have you spoken to him? Jonathan asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. No, but he left a message. Vivian hesitated. He said he'll return the wallet again. But tonight, you'd understand what that meant. Jonathan nodded, a complex emotion tightening his chest. The night they'd met, Miguel returning the wallet Jonathan had deliberately planted as a test of character. Coming full circle. Cancel my evening appointments, he instructed quietly. Already done. Vivian moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I never believed he was guilty. Neither did you, not really. That's why you let him go. After she left, Jonathan sank into his chair, the weight of the past 3 weeks pressing down on him. He had doubted Miguel publicly, painfully, despite everything they had shared, despite the connection that had grown between them, transcending professional boundaries. Would Miguel forgive that betrayal? Could the trust between them be rebuilt? More importantly, did Jonathan deserve a second chance? He opened the file Vivian had left, forcing himself to read every detail of Harding's scheme. The meticulous planning, the manipulation of evidence, the exploitation of Jonathan's growing isolation after the initial breach. And through it all, Miguel had never stopped believing in his own innocence or in Jonathan's fundamental goodness, even when Jonathan had failed to fully believe in him. As night fell, Jonathan dismissed his security detail and waited alone in his penthouse. The space felt emptier than usual, the silence heavier. He poured a scotch but didn't drink it, the amber liquid catching the light as rain continued to fall outside. At 10:17 p.m., the private elevator announced an arrival. Jonathan rose, heart beating faster than he would have admitted. Miguel stepped into the penthouse, rain-damp and weary but standing tall. In his hand was the same leather wallet from their first meeting, worn now from the months between. They regarded each other across the space, everything and nothing to say. "You returned." Jonathan finally broke the silence. "I said I would." Miguel approached slowly. "Once I found the truth." "The truth?" Jonathan's laugh held no humor. "That I trusted the wrong people." "Again." "Not entirely." Miguel placed the wallet on the coffee table between them. "You trusted me enough to let me go, to give me a chance to prove my innocence." Jonathan couldn't hold his gaze. "After first believing you guilty, after doubting everything I knew about you, the evidence was convincing." Miguel's voice held no bitterness. "Harding was thorough. That's no excuse." Jonathan finally looked up, allowing Miguel to see the full weight of his regret. "I should have trusted you completely. After everything we shared, everything you came to mean to me." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Miguel sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally showing through his composed exterior. "When you doubted me," he said quietly, "it hurt more than I thought possible. Not because of the professional consequences, but because," he paused, searching for words, "because I had come to care what you thought of me, more than anyone else in this country." Jonathan moved to sit beside him, not touching but close. "I'm sorry, Miguel. More than I can adequately express." "I know." Miguel's smile was small but genuine. "That's why I came back. Not just to clear my name, but because despite everything, this is where I belong." The simple declaration pierced Jonathan's carefully maintained control. He reached for Miguel's hand, finding it steady and warm in his. "There's something else you should know," Miguel continued, his expression grave. "Something I found in Harding's files that isn't in the FBI reports." Jonathan tensed. "Tell me." "It's about Elena and Sophia." Miguel's grip tightened slightly. "The boating accident." Harding had information suggesting it wasn't an accident at all. The world seemed to stop. Jonathan's breath caught painfully in his chest. "What?" 12 years ago, Harding was a junior executive, eager to advance. He discovered that Elena had evidence of financial irregularities, early improprieties that could have damaged the company. Miguel's voice remained gentle but firm. "He sabotaged the boat, Jonathan. Not intending murder, according to his notes. Just a mishap serious enough to divert attention from the financial investigation Elena was quietly conducting." Jonathan felt the room tilt, decades-old grief suddenly fresh and sharp as a knife. "Elena was investigating the company?" "My company?" "She found discrepancies that troubled her. As your wife, she felt obligated to protect your legacy by quietly resolving them before they became public." Miguel released Jonathan's hand to retrieve a flash drive from his pocket. "Everything is here. Harding's notes, Elena's original findings, the evidence of tampering with the boat." Jonathan took the drive, its small weight unbearably heavy. 12 years, he whispered. "I've spent 12 years believing it was a tragic accident, random, meaningless fate." "I'm sorry," Miguel said simply. "I debated whether to tell you, but you deserve the truth, however painful." The consideration in those words, the care for Jonathan's feelings, even after everything that had happened, broke something open inside him. Without conscious thought, he reached for Miguel, pulling him into an embrace that was part gratitude, part desperate need for human connection in the face of devastating revelation. Miguel held him without hesitation, strong arms steadying Jonathan as the implications washed over him. Elena and Sophia hadn't died by chance. They had been taken from him through deliberate human action, however unintended the fatal outcome might have been. "I should have protected them," Jonathan said hoarsely against Miguel's shoulder. "You couldn't have known," Miguel replied, his hand moving in comforting circles on Jonathan's back. "And Elena was trying to protect you too. You both acted from love." They remained that way for long minutes, the comfort of human contact gradually easing the initial shock. When Jonathan finally pulled back, his face was damp but his eyes clear. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for bringing me the truth. All of it." Miguel nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "What will you do now?" "Ensure Harding faces justice. For everything." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "And then?" He looked around the penthouse that had been his solitary kingdom for so long. Then perhaps it's time for other changes as well. What kind of changes? Miguel asked. Jonathan met his gaze directly. I've spent 12 years building walls around myself, using the company as both shield and weapon, trusting systems and protocols instead of people. His voice softened. Until you returned a wallet and somehow found your way past all my defenses. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and true. Miguel's expression held understanding but also caution. Jonathan, he began carefully. We've both been through extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps we should take time to... I've taken 12 years. Jonathan interrupted gently. I'm not suggesting we rush into anything, Miguel. Only that I don't want to lose this connection we've found. Whatever form it takes. Miguel's smile bloomed slowly, transforming his tired face. I don't want to lose it either. Then we start again, Jonathan decided. Not as CEO and employee, not as investigator and subject, just as two people who found trust in an unexpected place. He extended his hand formally. Jonathan Sterling, flawed human being trying to do better. Miguel took it, his grip warm and sure. Miguel Alvarez, engineer, former janitor, finder of lost wallets. Their hands remained clasped a moment longer than necessary, a promise of possibilities to come. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering in the darkness. A new beginning, hard-won but perhaps more valuable for the struggle that had preceded it. Jonathan Sterling had lost his family, nearly lost his company, and came perilously close to losing the one person who had reawakened his capacity for genuine connection. But as he sat beside Miguel in the quiet of the penthouse, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 12 long years. Hope, fragile but persistent, that his life might yet hold more than power and isolation. And Miguel Alvarez, who had crossed an ocean in search of his American dream, found that it had taken forms he never anticipated. Not just professional success or financial security, but the profound discovery that integrity, even in small acts like returning a wallet, could indeed change lives, including his own. What happens now? Miguel asked softly. Jonathan smiled, the expression reaching his eyes fully for the first time in recent memory. Now we build something better, together. And in that moment, both men recognized that the true test of character wasn't in wealth accumulated or power attained, but in the courage to remain open to connection even after betrayal, to offer second chances, to accept human imperfection, and to value integrity above all else. Not because someone might be watching, but because of who they chose to be when no one was.